The wedding ceremony lasted 6 hours, and Daniel Reed stood through all of it without complaint. His legs ached. His formal suit, designed by Talvosi tailors who barely concealed their disgust at his measurements, pinched at the shoulders. Around him, the assembled nobles of the Imperium whispered and laughed behind jeweled hands. He caught fragments of their conversations, his translator earpiece feeding him their words in flat, emotionless tones. Look at how small he is. The princess must be mortified. I heard humans break if you squeeze them too hard. Princess Lyra Talsarath stood beside him, towering nearly 2 feet above his height. Her skin held a faint blue luminescence common among her people. Her eyes, dark as deep space, stared straight ahead at the officiant. She had not looked at Daniel once during the entire ceremony. Not when they entered. Not when the priest bound their hands with the ceremonial cord. Not even when the contract was sealed and the crowd offered their hollow congratulations. Daniel understood. This was not a marriage. This was a political transaction. Earth needed access to Talvosi trade routes. The Imperium wanted human manufacturing technology. Someone in both governments decided that a wedding would make better optics than a simple contract signing. So here they were. When the ceremony finally ended, Lyra walked away without a word. Her guards followed. Daniel stood alone in the great hall as servants began clearing away the decorations. One of them, a young Talvosi male with purple markings on his neck, paused near Daniel. You should go to your quarters, the servant said quietly. The princess has already retired to hers. Separate quarters? Daniel asked. The servant's expression was almost pitying. Of course. Daniel nodded and made his way through the palace corridors. The building was massive, designed for beings larger and stronger than humans. Every door was heavy. Every ceiling was high. Every chair in every room was too large for comfort. He found his assigned quarters after 20 minutes of walking. The room was nice enough, clean, functional. It had a window that looked out over the capital city of Serath Prime, where towers of crystal and steel reached toward the purple sky. He removed the uncomfortable suit and changed into simple clothes. Then he sat by the window and watched the city lights flicker on as evening approached. He had known this assignment would be difficult. Earth's government had been honest with him about that much. When they approached him 6 months ago, they laid out the situation clearly. The Imperium saw humans as weak, primitive, useful for manufacturing, but not much else. The marriage was supposed to be symbolic, a gesture of goodwill that Earth hoped might open doors to real diplomatic relations. They needed someone who could endure humiliation without breaking. Someone who could smile through insults. Someone who could gather information while being completely underestimated. Daniel had volunteered. His military record was buried deep in classified databases. To anyone who checked, he was simply an engineer with a boring work history. The Imperium's background checks found nothing remarkable. They approved the match without a second thought. The next morning, Daniel woke early and explored the palace. He learned quickly that servants used different hallways than nobles. The servant passages were narrower, plainer, but they connected every part of the massive structure. He introduced himself to the staff he met. Most were surprised that he bothered speaking to them at all. Nobles never did. You are lost? Asked an older female servant with silver streaks in her hair. I am looking for the engineering section, Daniel said. I was told I could work there during the day. She studied him with curiosity. You wish to work? I am an engineer. It is what I do. She gave him directions. The engineering section was deep in the lower levels, far from the elegant halls where nobles spent their time. Daniel found it easily enough. The room was large and filled with equipment he did not recognize. 3 Talvosi engineers looked up when he entered. Who are you? One of them asked. Daniel Reed, I was told I could work here. You are the human, another said. It was not a question. The princess's husband. The word came out wrong, like they were not sure it applied. Yes, Daniel said simply. They exchanged glances. Finally, the first one shrugged. There is a workstation in the back. It is not being used. You may have it. Daniel thanked them and settled in. The equipment was different from Earth technology, but the principles were the same. Physics worked the same everywhere in the universe. He spent the day familiarizing himself with Talvosi systems, asking occasional questions that his new colleagues answered with varying degrees of patience. He did not see Lyra for 3 days. When they finally crossed paths in a palace corridor, she was surrounded by advisors and military officers. She wore armor, he noticed. Even inside the palace, she dressed for war. She glanced at him as they passed, her expression unreadable, and continued walking. One of her officers, a large male with scars across his face, stopped and looked down at Daniel. "You should stay out of the princess's way, human," he said. "She has important matters to attend to. She does not need reminders of her father's political mistakes." Daniel met his eyes calmly. "I will do my best." The officer snorted and walked away. That evening, Daniel ate dinner alone in his quarters. A servant brought him food, Talvosi cuisine modified to be safe for human consumption. It was bland but edible. He ate while reviewing technical documents on his datapad, learning the specifications of the palace's defense systems. They were powerful but inefficient. The Talvosi built everything to be strong, but strength alone created waste. He made notes. Small things, observations. Nothing that would raise suspicion. Over the following weeks, a pattern emerged. Daniel worked in the engineering section during the day. He ate alone. He walked the palace, learning its layout, memorizing the routines of the guards and staff. He listened to gossip in the servant corridors. He attended formal dinners when required, sitting at the far end of the table while nobles discussed politics and war, as if he were not there. Lord Crane, a powerful noble with ambitions toward the throne, seemed to take particular pleasure in making jokes at Daniel's expense. "Tell me, human," Crane said one evening during a state dinner, "how does it feel to be the weakest person in any room you enter?" The table fell silent. All eyes turned to Daniel. He set down his fork carefully. "I would not know, Lord Crane. I have never thought to measure myself against others in such terms." "No?" Crane smiled. "Perhaps because the comparison would be too painful." Light laughter rippled around the table. Daniel picked up his fork and continued eating. Lyra, seated beside her father at the head of the table, stared at her plate. When the dinner ended, Daniel returned to his quarters. He felt no anger at Crane's words. Anger was a distraction. He had a job to do, and that job required patience. He opened his datapad and continued his studies. Tomorrow he would be at the palace for exactly 1 month. In that time, he had learned the layout of the entire structure, identified every security system, memorized the daily routines of 73 staff members and 41 nobles, and gained unrestricted access to the engineering database. Earth would be pleased with his progress, and the Imperium still thought he was just a weak, harmless human who happened to marry their princess. 3 months into his marriage, Daniel had become invisible. Nobles passed him in corridors without acknowledgement. Guards no longer checked his credentials when he moved through secured areas. The engineering staff had grown comfortable with his presence, sometimes even asking his opinion on technical problems. He was furniture now, harmless and forgettable, perfect. He was reviewing power distribution schematics when the alarm sounded. Not the sharp, urgent wail of a real emergency, but the lower, rhythmic pulse of a drill. Through the engineering bay's viewport, Daniel watched as defense platforms deployed around the planet. Talvosi warships moved into defensive formations, their movements practiced and precise. The engineers around him barely looked up from their work. "Another drill?" Daniel asked. "Third one this month," replied Nira, one of the junior engineers who had warmed to him. "The princess insists on constant readiness. She says the border systems have seen increased patrol activity from unknown vessels." Daniel filed that information away and returned to his work, but he watched the deployment carefully. The Talvosi response was powerful, overwhelming even, but it was also predictable. Every ship moved to predetermined coordinates. Every platform activated in sequence. It was doctrine, rigid and unchanging. A real enemy would see the pattern after one engagement. When the drill ended, he made notes in his personal files. Then he returned to his actual assignment for the day, which was improving the efficiency of the palace's environmental systems. He had discovered that the atmospheric processors were running at 60% efficiency when they could easily achieve 85% with minor adjustments. He submitted his proposal through the proper channels. 2 weeks later, he received approval to implement the changes. The modification took him 3 days to complete. When he finished, the environmental systems ran quietly and efficiently, using 15% less power than before. Nira looked at the results with genuine surprise. "This is excellent work, Daniel. You should present this to the chief engineer." "You present it," Daniel said. "I merely followed the technical specifications," she protested, but he insisted. He did not need recognition. He needed to be underestimated. That evening, he encountered Princess Lyra in the palace archives. He had been researching Talvosi military history, trying to understand how their tactical doctrine had developed. She was reading something on a datapad, seated at a table designed for someone her size. Daniel was about to leave quietly when she spoke. "You have been spending considerable time in the engineering section." He turned, surprised she had noticed. "Yes, Your Highness. Why?" "It is what I know how to do." She studied him for a long moment. "You do not seem unhappy here." "I am not unhappy. My father's advisors said you would complain. They said humans were emotionally fragile and required constant reassurance." She paused. "You have not complained once." Daniel considered his response carefully. "Complaining would not change my situation. It would only make those around me uncomfortable." "You are not what I expected," Lyra said. "What did you expect?" "Someone weaker." She caught herself. "That is to say, someone less composed." "I'm weak by your standards, Your Highness. Everyone here is stronger than me, faster, more durable. I accepted these facts before I arrived. Yet you do not seem bothered by them. Being bothered would not make me stronger." Lyra's expression shifted slightly. "It might have been respect. You are pragmatic. I try to be." She returned to her datapad. Daniel took it as a dismissal and moved toward the door. "Daniel," she said. He stopped. "The environmental systems improvement. That was your work, yes?" "I made suggestions. Nira implemented them. She told me the truth." Lyra's dark eyes met his. "It was clever work. My father's chief engineer has been trying to solve that problem for 2 years. I had a fresh perspective. Perhaps." She seemed about to say something else, then changed her mind. "You may continue your research." Over the following weeks, Lyra began appearing in places where Daniel worked. She never spoke to him directly, but she was present. In the archives. In the engineering bay. Once she even visited the servant corridors, where Daniel often took his lunch with the palace staff. "Lord," Crane noticed the change. "The princess seems fascinated by her pet human," he said loudly, during a council meeting that Daniel had been required to attend. He sat in the back of the room, taking notes as requested by the Emperor's secretary. "Perhaps she has grown fond of small breakable things." Several council members laughed. Lyra's expression remained neutral, but Daniel noticed her hand tighten on her datapad. "Lord Crane," she said calmly, "do you have an opinion on the border security issue we were discussing? Or are you only here to waste everyone's time?" Crane's smile faded. The meeting continued. Afterward, in the corridor outside the council chamber, Lyra approached Daniel. "You should not have to endure his insults," she said. "I have endured worse, Your Highness." "That is not the point." "With respect, what is the point?" She seemed frustrated, searching for words. "You are my husband. In title, at least. That should afford you some protection." "Your protection would make me appear weaker, not stronger. It would confirm what Crane and others already believe." "Which is?" "That I am helpless without you." Lyra fell silent. Then unexpectedly she smiled. It was a small expression, barely visible but genuine. "You think about these things." "I think about many things, Your Highness." "Lyra," she said. "When we are alone, you may call me Lyra." It was a small gesture but significant. Daniel inclined his head. "Lyra." Something shifted between them after that conversation. Lyra began seeking him out more deliberately. She asked him questions about Earth, about human culture, about his work. Daniel answered honestly, though he was always careful about what he revealed. He spoke about engineering and history, but never about military service or tactics. One evening, she invited him to dine with her in her quarters, rather than the formal dining hall. The room was large and comfortable, decorated with weapons and battle standards, a soldier's room. "You were a commander in the fleet," Daniel observed, noting the commendations on her wall. "I was," Lyra said, "before my father decided I was more valuable as a political bargaining chip." "You resent the marriage." "I resented you," she corrected. "I thought you were a symbol of my father's willingness to trade me for manufacturing contracts. And now? Now I think you are more complicated than you appear." She poured him a drink, something amber and smooth. "Tell me, Daniel, what do you think of the Imperium's military doctrine?" The question was unexpected and dangerous. Daniel chose his words carefully. "I am not a military analyst, Lyra. That was not my question." He sipped the drink, buying time. "Your fleet is powerful. Your warriors are skilled. Your technology is impressive, but—" "I did not say there was a but. You implied one." Daniel set down his glass. "Your tactics are predictable. Every drill I have watched follows the same patterns. Every response is predetermined. Strength is valuable, but if an enemy knows exactly how you will use that strength, they can plan around it." Lyra leaned back in her chair. "You watched our drills. You analyzed them. I observed them. Analysis would imply I had a reason to study them. And you have no such reason? I am an engineer, Lyra, not a tactician." She studied him for a long moment. "You are lying." Daniel's heart rate increased, but he kept his expression calm. "Why would I lie?" "I do not know yet." She stood and walked to her window. "But I am beginning to think that Earth sent me someone far more interesting than a simple engineer. Your imagination is active this evening. Perhaps." She turned back to face him. "Or perhaps I am finally paying attention." Daniel left her quarters an hour later, his mind racing. Lyra was intelligent. More than that, she was observant. He would need to be more careful. But as he walked through the quiet palace corridors back to his own quarters, he realized something else. For the first time since arriving, he had enjoyed himself. The conversation had been genuine. Lyra had spoken to him as an equal, not as a weak human or a political inconvenience. It was a complication he had not anticipated. When he reached his room, he encrypted a brief message to Earth. "Cover may be compromised. Princess is perceptive. Will adapt." He sent it through the secure channel and prepared for bed. Outside his window, the city lights sparkled across the valley. Somewhere in the darkness, he knew, threats were gathering at the borders of the Imperium. Unknown ships, increased activity, the signs of something building. He had studied enough military history to recognize the pattern. War was coming, and when it arrived, his role would change from observer to something far more dangerous. The attack came without warning, as all good attacks do. Daniel was in the engineering bay when the palace shuddered. Not the gentle vibration of a passing ship, but a violent shake that sent equipment crashing to the floor. Emergency lights activated throughout the facility, bathing everything in harsh red illumination. "We are under attack," Nira shouted, her face pale with fear. Through the viewport, Daniel saw weapons fire streak across the sky. 3 massive warships hung in orbit, their hulls marked with symbols he recognized from his intelligence briefings. The Krell Dominion, the Imperium's oldest and most dangerous rival. More explosions rocked the palace. The defense platforms that had looked so impressive during drills were being systematically destroyed. Talvosi warships scrambled to respond, but they were caught off guard, their formations scattered. "Everyone to the emergency shelters," ordered the chief engineer, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Standard evacuation protocols." Daniel followed the others toward the shelter, but his mind was racing. The Krell attack was coordinated and precise. They had studied the Talvosi response patterns just as he had. They knew exactly where the defense platforms would deploy, exactly how the fleet would position itself. They were exploiting every predictable element of Talvosi doctrine. The shelter was deep underground, carved from solid rock. Hundreds of palace staff and lower-ranking nobles crowded into the space. Daniel found a corner and watched the tactical display on the wall. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. 2 more defense platforms destroyed, 1 Talvosi cruiser crippled. The Krell were pressing their advantage with brutal efficiency. An hour passed. Then 2. The attacks continued in waves. Finally, a messenger arrived, a young military officer with blood on her uniform. "The Emperor is wounded," she announced. "Princess Lyra has assumed command of the defense." Murmurs of concern rippled through the shelter. Daniel pushed through the crowd toward the officer. "Where is the command center?" he asked. She looked at him with confusion. "Who are you?" "I am the princess's husband." "Where is she?" "The Royal Command Center, but you cannot—" Daniel was already moving. He knew the palace layout better than most who lived here. The command center was 3 levels up and half a kilometer east. He ran through empty corridors, stepping over debris and broken equipment. 2 guards tried to stop him at the command center entrance. "I need to see the princess." "No civilians in the command center," one guard said firmly. "I am her husband. I have information that may help." They exchanged glances. Before they could refuse, the door opened and Lyra emerged. She looked exhausted, her armor scorched in places. "Daniel, what are you doing here?" "I need to speak with you. Privately." "I do not have time. They are winning because they studied your tactical doctrine," Daniel said quickly. "Every move your fleet makes is exactly what they expect. You need to change your approach." Lyra stared at him. Then she grabbed his arm and pulled him into a side room. The door closed behind them. "Explain, quickly." Daniel pulled up a holographic display from his datapad. The Krell positioned their 3 fleets here, here, and here. These positions allow them to cover all standard Talvosi defensive formations. Every time your ships move to a doctrine-approved position, they are in the optimal kill zone for Krell weapons. Your defense platforms deployed in the standard pattern, so the Krell knew exactly where to target first. "How do you know our tactical doctrine?" "I studied it months ago. Anyone who observes your drills can see the patterns." Lyra's eyes narrowed. "You are not just an engineer. Right now, that does not matter. What matters is that you are losing because you are predictable." "And you have a solution?" Daniel hesitated. This was the moment he had prepared for, but had hoped would never come. If he helped her now, his cover was completely blown. Earth's intelligence asset in the Imperium would be exposed. But if he stayed silent, thousands would die. "I have ideas," he said carefully, "but if I share them, you will know I am not what I pretended to be." Another explosion shook the palace. Lyra's communicator crackled with panicked reports. She looked at Daniel, her expression intense. "I do not care what you pretended to be. Can you help us?" "Yes, then help us." They returned to the command center together. Officers looked up in shock as Lyra brought a human into their most secure facility. Lord Crane was there, his face twisted with anger. "You bring a human here? Now has the stress broken your mind, Princess?" "Be silent, Crane," Lyra snapped. She turned to her tactical officer. "Give him access to the defense grid." "Your Highness, I must protest." "Give him access now." The officer complied, though his hands shook with barely controlled fury. Daniel stepped up to the command console and studied the displays. The situation was worse than he had thought. The Krell had damaged the orbital defense network severely. The Talvosi fleet was down to 60% strength. At their current rate of attrition, the battle would be lost within 2 hours. "You need to abandon the standard defensive formations," Daniel said. "Pull your ships back to positions the Krell will not expect." "Retreat?" Crane snarled. "That is cowardice. That is survival," Daniel countered. "Your ships are being destroyed because they are where the Krell want them to be. Move them somewhere unexpected." "Where?" Lyra asked. Daniel highlighted several positions on the display. They were not in the tactical manual. They violated formation doctrine. They left key sectors seemingly undefended. "This is insane," the tactical officer said. "This is misdirection," Daniel replied. He pulled up calculations on the display. "If your fleet moves here, the Krell will think you are abandoning these orbital facilities. They will move to capture them. But you will have positioned defense platforms here and here, hidden in the debris field from your destroyed stations. When the Krell move in, you spring the trap." "Using debris as cover is dishonorable," Crane said. "Honor does not matter if you are dead," Daniel said flatly. Lyra studied the plan. "This could work. It is a coward's strategy. Enough, Crane." Lyra turned to her officers. "Implement the plan. Now." For a moment, Daniel thought the officers would refuse. But Lyra was the Emperor's daughter and the acting commander. They had no choice. Orders went out to the fleet. Ships began moving to the positions Daniel had specified. The Krell responded exactly as he predicted. They saw the Talvosi retreat and pressed forward, eager to capture the orbital facilities. Their formations shifted, becoming more aggressive and less cautious. "Now activate the hidden platforms," Daniel said. The platforms emerged from the debris, their weapons fully charged. The Krell fleet found itself caught in a crossfire, with Talvosi warships behind them and platforms ahead. For the first time since the battle began, the Krell were reacting instead of acting. "Target their command ship," Daniel said, "the largest one in the center formation. If you can disable it, their coordination will collapse." "How do you know that?" Lyra asked. "The Krell use centralized command structures. Take out the flagship and the rest will falter." Lyra gave the order. Every available weapon focused on the Krell flagship. The massive ship's shields flared and held, but under concentrated fire they began to fail. A Telvosi cruiser rammed the flagship's engine section in a desperate maneuver. The collision was catastrophic. Both ships were destroyed, but the Krell flagship was gone. Exactly as Daniel predicted, the remaining Krell ships lost cohesion. Their formations broke apart. Some vessels continued attacking while others tried to retreat. The Talvosi fleet, finally given a clear advantage, pressed the attack. Within 30 minutes, the surviving Krell ships fled into slipspace. The battle was over. The command center erupted in surprise celebration. Officers who had doubted Daniel's plan now looked at him with shock and confusion. Crane stood silent, his expression dark. Lyra turned to Daniel. "You just saved the Imperium. Your warriors did the fighting," Daniel said quietly. "I only suggested a different approach. Who are you really? Someone who reads too much and notices patterns? You are lying again." "Perhaps." She stepped closer, lowering her voice so only he could hear. "When this is over, you and I will have a very long conversation. I expected nothing less." Outside the palace, the city burned in dozens of places. Medical teams rushed to treat the wounded. Engineers worked to restore damaged systems. The price of victory had been high, but it could have been so much worse. Daniel returned to the engineering bay to help with repairs. His hands were steady as he worked, but his mind was troubled. He had revealed too much. Earth's careful positioning was compromised. But thousands of lives had been saved. He would accept whatever consequences came. But first they needed to rebuild. Because Daniel had studied the Krell enough to know one thing with certainty: this was not over. This was just the beginning. Reconstruction took 3 days. During that time, Daniel worked alongside engineers to restore damaged systems. Nobody spoke to him about the battle. Nobody asked questions about his tactics. But everyone watched him differently now. The invisible human had become visible, and that was a problem. On the 4th day after the attack, Lyra summoned him to her private study. The room overlooked the damaged city below, where repair crews still worked to restore power to entire districts. She stood by the window, still wearing her battle armor despite the fighting being over. "The Emperor is recovering," she said without preamble. "He wishes to meet with you personally." "I am honored." "Are you?" She turned to face him. "Because you do not look honored. You look worried." Daniel chose honesty. "I am worried." "Of what?" "Of the questions that will be asked. Of the assumptions that will be made." Lyra walked to her desk and activated a holographic display. Images appeared, scrolling through battle data and tactical analyses. "My officers have been studying what happened during the attack, the tactics you employed, the predictions you made about Krell behavior, the knowledge you demonstrated about their command structure. I studied available intelligence reports." "Stop lying to me, Daniel." Her voice was firm but not angry. "We have shared meals together. We have spoken as friends. I think I have earned the truth." He met her eyes and saw no hostility there, only curiosity and perhaps disappointment at being deceived. "What do you want to know?" "Everything, starting with who you really are." Daniel walked to the window and looked out over the city. "I am Daniel Reed. That part was not a lie. I am an engineer. That was also true. But I am also former Earth Defense Force Special Operations Division. I served for 12 years before being recruited for diplomatic service." "You are a spy." "I am an intelligence asset. There is a difference." "Explain it to me." "A spy steals secrets. I observe and report. Earth needed someone who could live in the heart of the Imperium and understand how it functions. Your government's public face is different from its private reality. We needed to know which version was true." Lyra absorbed this information. "And the marriage?" "Was exactly what both governments claimed. A political arrangement, but also an opportunity for Earth to position someone with access to important information. You used me." "Yes," Daniel said simply, "and I apologize for that. But I never lied about my respect for you. That was real." She was silent for a long moment. Did you know the Krell would attack? No. We knew tensions were increasing at the border, but not when or where they would strike. Yet you knew exactly how to counter them. I studied Krell tactical doctrine. It is available in public military databases. Their patterns are as predictable as yours. Any trained analyst could have done what I did. Any trained analyst, Lyra repeated. But you are more than an analyst, are you not? You commanded soldiers. I did. How many? That is classified. How many, Daniel? He turned to face her. At my peak command, I led a battalion. 800 soldiers across 6 operations. We specialized in unconventional warfare. Lyra's expression changed. Not anger, but reassessment. She was seeing him completely differently now. Earth sent us a warrior and called him an engineer. Earth sent you someone who could help if needed. I hoped it would never be necessary. But it was necessary. You saved thousands of lives. Your warriors did the fighting. With your strategy. She deactivated the holographic display. The Emperor wants to reward you. He plans to grant you a noble title and position within the military command. I do not want that. What do you want? To continue as I was. Quiet. Unremarkable. That is impossible now. Everyone knows what you did. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. This was not supposed to happen. I was supposed to remain invisible. You saved the Imperium's capital. There is no remaining invisible after that. Lyra paused. Lord Crane is calling for your arrest. He says you are a spy and a threat to our security. He is not entirely wrong. But he is not entirely right either. She walked closer to him. I told my father that you acted to preserve life, not to harm the Imperium. That your knowledge, whatever its source, was used in our defense. And what did he say? That he wants to hear your explanation personally. She placed a hand on his shoulder. Daniel, I am going to ask you something and I need complete honesty. I will try. Is Earth a threat to the Imperium? He considered the question carefully. Not in the way you mean. Earth does not seek to conquer or destroy the Imperium. We respect your power and your civilization. But Earth will not be conquered either. We are not as weak as we appear. We have learned to survive by being clever rather than strong. If threatened, we would defend ourselves effectively. How effectively? Very. Lyra removed her hand and walked back to her desk. You should know that I accessed classified Earth databases using your credentials. Daniel's blood went cold. When? 2 days ago, while you were repairing the power grid. She pulled up files on her display. I wanted to understand who I had married. What I found was fascinating and troubling. The files showed Earth's true military history. Thousands of years of warfare, weapons development, tactical innovations, strategic thinking that had been refined through constant conflict. Your species has been fighting itself since before we discovered space travel, Lyra said quietly. You have developed more ways to kill than any civilization we have encountered. Your military doctrine is built on deception, misdirection, and psychological warfare. You are not weak, Daniel. You are terrifying. We prefer not to advertise that fact. Why? Because we learned the hard way that being perceived as dangerous creates enemies. Being perceived as harmless creates opportunities. To spy on civilizations that underestimate you. To understand civilizations before committing to alliances. Yes. Lyra closed the files. How many other humans in the Imperium are like you? Trained warriors pretending to be merchants and engineers? I cannot answer that. Cannot or will not? Both. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. My father will ask the same question, and I will give him the same answer. He may not accept that. I know. They stood in silence, the weight of revelations hanging between them. Finally, Lyra spoke again. Despite everything, I am glad you were here during the attack. Your tactics saved many lives, including mine. I would do it again, even knowing it would expose you? Yes. Why? Daniel met her eyes. Because over these months I came to care about the people here, about you. That was not part of my assignment. That was not strategic. It was simply human. Lyra's expression softened slightly. You are a complicated man, Daniel Reed. Most humans are. That is another thing we hide well. Come, she said. The Emperor expects us. Whatever happens next, we face it together. They walked through the palace corridors side by side. Daniel noticed servants and guards watching them pass. Word had spread. The weak human husband had revealed himself to be something else entirely. He could see confusion and suspicion in their faces. Some showed fear. The throne room was full of nobles and military officers. Emperor Vorn sat on his throne, his injury bandaged, but his bearing still strong. Lord Crane stood near the front, his expression dark and triumphant. The human arrives, Crane announced loudly. The spy who deceived us all. Daniel and Lyra approached the throne and bowed. The Emperor studied Daniel with intelligent eyes. Daniel Reed, the Emperor said, you have given us much to consider. You saved our world, but you also lied about who you are. You entered our home under false pretenses. Yes, Your Majesty, I did. Lord Crane believes you should be arrested and tried for espionage. That is his right to believe. What do you believe? Daniel straightened. I believe I did what my government asked of me. I observed. I learned. I reported. But when crisis came, I chose to help rather than hide. I do not regret that choice. Even though it has exposed you? Even then? The Emperor leaned back. You are either very brave or very foolish. Perhaps both, Your Majesty. Unexpectedly, the Emperor smiled. I like honest fools better than clever liars. You will remain in the palace as my daughter's husband, but you will also serve as an advisor to our military command. Your knowledge of unconventional tactics may prove valuable. Crane stepped forward. Your Majesty, this is unacceptable. Silence, Crane. My decision is made. The Emperor's eyes hardened. Unless you wish to challenge it formally. It was a dangerous offer. A formal challenge meant ritual combat. Crane looked at Daniel, clearly weighing his options. Then he bowed stiffly and stepped back. The audience ended. As they left the throne room, Lyra spoke quietly. You have made a powerful enemy in Crane. I know. He will come for you eventually. I know that too. Are you worried? Daniel thought about his training, about the combat skills he had not used in years, about the advantages a human could have against a stronger opponent if he fought smart rather than strong. No, he said finally. I am not worried. He probably should have been. The diplomatic quarters were quieter than the rest of the palace. Daniel sat across from Ambassador Wells, Earth's official representative to the Imperium. The older woman had arrived within hours of the battle's conclusion, her expression neutral but her eyes sharp with assessment. You were supposed to maintain a low profile, Wells said. Her tone carried no anger, only statement of fact. The situation demanded action. Thousands would have died. And now your cover is compromised. The entire Imperium knows you are more than an engineer. They know I have military training. They do not know the extent of Earth's capabilities or our intelligence network. Wells nodded slowly. Princess Lyra accessed classified databases using your credentials. We detected the breach, I know, she told me. What exactly did she see? Military history, tactical doctrine, weapons development. Enough to understand that Earth is not helpless, but not enough to understand how we would deploy those capabilities. Correct. Wells stood and walked to the window. The Imperium's High Council has been meeting constantly since the attack. There is significant debate about Earth's role in galactic affairs. Some, like Lord Crane, want to classify us as a potential threat. Others see opportunity for closer alliance. Where does the Emperor stand? Uncertain. You impressed him by saving his capital, but you also frightened him by demonstrating capabilities he did not know existed. Daniel rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of unintended consequences. What does Earth want me to do? Continue as you have been. The marriage stands. Your advisory position gives us legitimate access to Imperium military planning. Use it carefully. And if Crane forces a confrontation? Win. Wells turned to face him. Daniel, you need to understand something. Earth's position in galactic politics is delicate. We have been the harmless traders for 2 centuries. That image serves us well, but we always knew it could not last forever. You wanted this, Daniel said quietly. Not specifically, but something like it. An incident that would force Earth to reveal some of our capabilities. We needed the galactic community to see us as more than merchants, but we needed the revelation to come in a context where we were defending allies, not threatening enemies. You gave us exactly that. That was not my intention. The best intelligence operations never are. Wells collected her datapad. Continue your work. Build trust with Princess Lyra. She is influential and she clearly respects you now. That relationship is valuable. After the ambassador left, Daniel sat alone with his thoughts. The marriage that had begun as pure political theater was becoming something more complicated. Lyra sought his company now, not from obligation but from genuine interest. They spent evenings discussing tactics and strategy, her questions probing and intelligent. She wanted to understand how humans thought about warfare. You see battle differently than we do, she said one evening as they reviewed historical conflicts on her holographic display. Talvosi doctrine emphasizes strength and honor. Direct confrontation, decisive victory. Those are valid approaches when you have overwhelming power, Daniel said. Humans rarely have that advantage. We learned to fight smarter because we could not fight stronger. Show me an example. He pulled up a conflict from Earth's history. 2 armies. One has superior numbers and equipment. The other is smaller and poorly supplied. Traditional military doctrine says the larger force should win easily. Obviously. But the smaller force wins by avoiding direct confrontation. They strike supply lines. They ambush isolated units. They make the terrain work for them. They turn the enemy's strength into a weakness by forcing them to spread out to protect their assets. Lyra studied the tactical map. This is dishonorable. This is survival. Honor is a luxury of the strong. You truly believe that? I believe that survival comes first. Once you survive, you can debate honor. Daniel closed the display. Your warriors are brave and powerful, but they are predictable. The Krell knew this. That is why they nearly won. And you knew it too. Yes. She was silent for a moment. Teach me. Teach you what? How to think like you. How to see warfare as humans do. Why? Because the Krell will return. And when they do, I want to be ready. So they began. Every evening, Daniel taught Lyra the principles of unconventional warfare. Deception, misdirection, psychological operations, how to make an enemy see what you want them to see, how to turn an opponent's strength against them, how to win without fighting when possible, and how to fight dirty when necessary. She was a quick student, her military mind adapting to these new concepts with impressive speed. But she also questioned everything, challenging assumptions and pushing for deeper understanding. Why do humans prefer deception over direct confrontation? She asked one evening. Because deception costs fewer lives. If you can make an enemy surrender without fighting, no one needs to die. But that denies warriors their honor. It keeps them alive. They can find honor later. Lyra shook her head. My people would struggle with this philosophy. I know. That is both your strength and your weakness. During this time, Lord Crane watched and waited. Daniel saw him in the palace corridors, at state functions, in the council chambers. Always watching. Always calculating. Daniel knew a confrontation was inevitable. Crane's honor demanded it. He had been publicly humiliated when the Emperor accepted Daniel's service. The only way to restore that honor was through challenge. The challenge came on a morning when spring rain fell across the capital. Daniel was reviewing fleet deployment data when Crane entered the command center, flanked by 2 witnesses as tradition required. Daniel Reed, Crane announced loudly, I formally challenge you to ritual combat. You have brought dishonor to this palace through your deception. I will restore what you have stained. The room fell silent. Officers and analysts stopped working. Everyone knew this moment would come. Daniel looked up from his console. I accept. You understand the terms? We fight until first blood or surrender. Weapons of choice. No armor. I understand. Choose your weapon. Daniel considered. Crane was larger, stronger, faster. Any weapon that relied on strength would favor him. A sword, then. Something that required technique more than power. A blade. Standard length. Crane smiled, clearly pleased. Excellent choice. Tomorrow at dawn, the ceremonial grounds. I will be there. After Crane left, Lyra pulled Daniel into a private room. Her face was pale with concern. Why did you accept? You could have refused. Claimed diplomatic immunity. And looked weak forever. This was always going to happen, Lyra. Better to face it now. Crane is a master swordsman. He has won 43 duels. Then this will be his 44th fight. The outcome remains to be seen. This is not a joke, Daniel. He could kill you. The rules say first blood or surrender. Accidents happen in combat. He could claim he struck too hard by mistake. Daniel took her hands gently. I know the risks. But I cannot back down from this. If I refuse, I lose all credibility. Everything I have built here collapses. Then let me train you tonight. I can show you techniques. I know how to fight, Lyra. She stopped. What? I was special operations for 12 years. Close quarters combat was part of my training. I have fought opponents larger and stronger than me many times. And one, I survived. That is what matters. That evening, Lyra insisted on watching him practice. Daniel agreed, though he knew it would reveal more about human combat training than he preferred. He went through forms and exercises, his movements precise and economical. Where Talvosi fighting emphasized power and aggressive strikes, human techniques focused on efficiency and opponent manipulation. You fight like you plan battles, Lyra observed, looking for weaknesses, avoiding strength. Yes, will it be enough against Crane? I do not know, but it is what I have. She stepped closer. If you die tomorrow, I want you to know something. What? I am glad we met. Even with the deception and complications, I am glad. Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. I am glad too. That night he barely slept. He reviewed everything he knew about Talvosi combat styles. Their reliance on power, their aggressive opening attacks, their pride that prevented them from using defensive techniques. He planned his strategy carefully, knowing he would only get one chance. Dawn came cold and clear. The ceremonial grounds were packed with nobles and officers, all eager to watch the human face a master warrior. Daniel arrived wearing simple combat clothes, carrying the borrowed blade. It felt awkward in his hand, heavier than weapons he was trained with, but the principles remained the same. Crane stood at the center of the circle, already holding his sword. He looked confident, eager. The referee, a senior military officer, outlined the rules. First blood or surrender. The fighters would begin 10 paces apart. At the signal, combat would commence. Daniel took his position. Across from him, Crane smiled with absolute certainty. The signal sounded. Crane charged forward with overwhelming aggression, exactly as Daniel predicted. His opening strike was powerful enough to split stone. But Daniel was not there to meet it. He sidestepped, letting Crane's momentum carry him past. The crowd murmured with surprise. Crane recovered and attacked again. This time Daniel parried, not trying to match strength against strength, but redirecting the force. Crane stumbled slightly, surprised by the technique. Fight me properly, human, Crane snarled. I am fighting, Daniel replied calmly. The pattern continued. Crane attacked with power and fury. Daniel evaded, redirected, made minimal movements for maximum effect. He was letting Crane exhaust himself, waiting for the inevitable moment when aggression would create an opening. It came 5 minutes into the fight. Crane overextended on a particularly aggressive thrust. For just a fraction of a second, his guard was open. Daniel moved faster than he had throughout the entire fight, his blade striking Crane's shoulder with precise control. First blood? The referee called the match. Crane stood frozen in shock. A thin line of blue blood ran down his shoulder. The master swordsman had lost to the weak human. The crowd was silent. Daniel lowered his blade and bowed with respect. Well fought, Lord Crane. Crane's expression was unreadable. Then slowly he returned the bow. You are not what you appear to be, human. Few things are. As Daniel left the ceremonial grounds, he found Lyra waiting. She was smiling. That was brilliant, she said. That was desperate. That was human. They walked back to the palace together, and Daniel realized that everything had changed again. He had proven himself in the most traditional Talvosi way possible. Through combat and victory. Now came the hard part, living with the consequences. 6 weeks passed in uneasy peace. The Imperium rebuilt its defenses, implementing new tactical doctrines based on Daniel's recommendations. The rigid, predictable formations gave way to flexible responses. Officers who had mocked the human now sought his counsel. Even Lord Crane, his honor satisfied through combat, had become grudgingly respectful. But Daniel felt the tension building. Intelligence reports showed increased Krell activity along every border. Not raids or probing attacks, but coordinated fleet movements. Something massive was coming. He was in the war room when the alarm sounded, not the practice drills that had become routine, but the sharp, urgent wail of actual threat. Officers rushed to their stations. Holographic displays activated, showing the space around Sarath Prime. Daniel's breath caught. 200 warships had emerged from slip space simultaneously. The Krell Dominion's entire battle fleet, positioned in a perfect sphere around the planet. Every approach vector was covered. Every escape route was blocked. They cannot possibly have brought their entire military, breathed the tactical officer. This is a significant portion of their total naval strength. The communication channel opened. A Krell commander appeared, his scaled face expressionless. Imperium of Talvos, you are surrounded and outmatched. Surrender within 1 hour, or we will reduce your capital to ash. This is not negotiation. This is inevitability. The channel closed. The war room erupted in panicked discussion. The Emperor arrived moments later with Lyra close behind. She saw Daniel immediately, her eyes questioning. Analysis? The Emperor demanded. The tactical officer displayed the formation. They have us completely surrounded, Your Majesty. Our fleet is outnumbered 3-1. Even with the new tactics, we cannot win against such overwhelming force. What are our options? Surrender? Or die fighting? No, Daniel said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. There is a third option. Speak, the Emperor commanded. Daniel walked to the main display. They are showing overwhelming strength deliberately. 200 ships in perfect formation. It is psychological warfare. They want you to see how hopeless resistance appears. It does not just appear hopeless, Crane said grimly. It is hopeless, is it? Daniel manipulated the display, zooming in on the Krell formation. Look at their positioning. Perfect sphere. Maximum coverage, but also maximum coordination required. 200 ships all maintaining exact positions. That requires constant communication and adjustment. Your point? Lyra asked. They are connected. One central command ship is coordinating the entire fleet. If we can identify and disable that command ship, their formation collapses into chaos. We cannot reach their command ship through that formation, the tactical officer protested. They would destroy any ship we send. Daniel smiled thinly. We do not send a ship. We send a message. He pulled up data on his personal console and transferred it to the main display. Lines of code appeared, complex and dense. This is a virus I designed 3 weeks ago. It exploits a vulnerability in Krell communication protocols. If we can inject it into their network, it will propagate through their entire fleet in minutes. How do we inject it? The Emperor asked. We transmit it through their own communication channel. When they contact us again to demand surrender, we hide the virus in our response. They will not detect it until it is too late. The room fell silent. Officers exchanged uncertain glances. Finally, the chief technical officer spoke. This is possible. I have reviewed the Krell protocols. There is indeed a vulnerability, but the virus would need to be extraordinarily sophisticated. It is, Daniel said. Trust me. You have been planning this, Lyra said. It was not a question. I have been planning for many contingencies. The Emperor studied Daniel for a long moment. If this fails, we will have provoked them into immediate attack. If we surrender, you lose your sovereignty. If we fight conventionally, you lose your fleet. This gives us a chance, a human chance, Crane said. But there was no mockery in his tone now. Only grim acknowledgement. Implement the plan, the Emperor ordered. Daniel worked quickly, refining the virus with the help of Imperium's best technical specialists. They had 45 minutes before the Krell's deadline. Every second counted. The virus needed to be invisible until activation, sophisticated enough to bypass Krell security, and devastating enough to cripple their command and control. With 5 minutes remaining, it was ready. The Krell commander appeared again on the communication channel. Your time is nearly expired. What is your answer? The Emperor stood before the display, his bearing regal despite the circumstances. The Imperium does not surrender. We are prepared to negotiate a peaceful resolution. There is no negotiation, only submission. Then you leave us no choice but to resist. The Krell commander's expression showed contempt. Very well. You have chosen destruction. The channel closed, but the virus had been transmitted, hidden in the communication protocol itself. Daniel watched the technical readouts, tracking the virus as it spread through the Krell network. Ship to ship, system to system, propagating faster than their security could detect. 30 seconds to activation, Daniel announced. The Krell fleet began moving into attack formation, weapons charged. The Imperium's own fleet prepared to launch a desperate defense they all knew was futile. 10 seconds. Daniel's hand hovered over the activation command. Everything came down to this moment. If the virus failed, thousands would die. If it succeeded, humanity's capabilities would be fully revealed to the galaxy. Activate. He pressed the command. For a moment, nothing happened. Then simultaneously, every Krell ship in the formation went dark. Lights died. Engines cut. Weapons powered down. 200 warships became 200 powerless hulls, drifting in space with no coordination, no communication, no control. The war room stood in stunned silence. What did you do? Lyra whispered. I disabled every system on every ship. Life support remains active, but everything else is offline. They are no longer a threat. For how long? As long as I choose. The virus gives us complete control of their systems. The Emperor stared at the display showing 200 helpless warships. This is not possible. No one has technology that can do this. Earth does, Daniel said quietly. We have been developing cyber warfare capabilities for over a century. We do not build the largest ships or the most powerful weapons. We build the most sophisticated electronic warfare systems in known space. The communication channel activated again. But this time it was not the Krell commander. It was a human woman, her uniform marking her as Earth Defense Force. Sarath Prime, this is Admiral Park of the EDF First Fleet. We detected the Krell invasion force and moved to intercept. Do you require assistance? Behind her, the display showed 50 Earth warships emerging from slipspace. They were smaller than Krell or Talvosi ships, but they moved with perfect coordination, their formations fluid and adaptive. The Emperor found his voice. Admiral Park, your arrival is timely, though it appears the immediate threat has been neutralized. We noticed. Impressive work with the virus. Admiral Park smiled slightly. We were prepared to deploy it ourselves if needed. You have this capability as well? Every Earth ship carries similar systems, Your Majesty. We believe in being prepared. Lyra turned to Daniel. How many ships does Earth have? That is classified. Daniel, he met her eyes. Enough. We have enough. The Emperor's expression was difficult to read. It seems Earth has been concealing significantly more than tactical doctrine. Admiral Park's image spoke again. Your Majesty, Earth would like to propose a formal military alliance. The Krell Dominion has proven themselves hostile to both our interests. Together we can ensure this aggression is not repeated. And if we refuse this alliance, then we will depart and leave you to negotiate with the Krell on your own terms. But I suspect having 200 disabled warships gives you considerable leverage for those negotiations. The Emperor looked at Daniel. What do you recommend? I recommend accepting Earth's alliance, but I am clearly biased. Despite the tension, the Emperor almost smiled. Yes, you are. He turned to the display. Admiral Park, the Imperium accepts Earth's offer of alliance. Let us discuss terms. The next hours were a blur of negotiations and coordination. The Krell fleet was given a choice. Power down permanently and return home with disabled weapon systems or be destroyed. They chose to leave. Earth's virus ensured they could not reverse the damage for months, long enough for the balance of power to shift permanently. When it was over, Daniel stood on a balcony overlooking the capital city. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. He heard footsteps behind him and knew without looking that it was Lyra. We have been married for nearly a year, she said, and I feel like I am only now meeting my husband. I apologize for the deception. Do you? Truly? Daniel considered. I apologize that it was necessary, not that I did it. Lyra stood beside him at the railing. My father is meeting with your Admiral Park. They are drafting a joint defense treaty. Earth and the Imperium formally allied. Is that what you want? I want to understand what we are allying with. Admiral Park told me something interesting. She said Earth has 50 ships in this fleet, but when I asked how many fleets Earth maintains, she only smiled. There are things I cannot tell you, Lyra. I know, but here is what I have learned on my own. Humans are not weak. You are patient. You are strategic. You reveal only what you must when you must. You let others underestimate you until the moment comes to show your truth. She paused. It is brilliant and terrifying. We learned these skills the hard way. Thousands of years of learning. And now the galaxy knows. Earth is not a minor trading partner. You are a power. We would prefer to be partners rather than powers. You can be both. She turned to face him. The marriage that began as political theater has become something different. You saved my world twice. You taught me to think differently about warfare and strategy. You defeated Crane in honorable combat. By every measure of Talvosi culture, you have earned respect and position. And by human measures? What do human measures say? Daniel met her eyes. That I have come to genuinely care for you. That was never part of the assignment. That was just me being foolish enough to fall in love with someone I was supposed to be using. Lyra's breath caught. You should have led with that information. I am not good at emotional tactics. Only military ones. She laughed, and the sound was warm and genuine. Then let me use simple language. I love you too, Daniel Reed. Spy, warrior, engineer, whatever you truly are. I love all of it. They stood together as night fell over Surath Prime, watching the lights of the city bloom below. Somewhere above them, Earth's fleet maintained position alongside Imperium ships, the beginning of an alliance that would change the balance of power in the galaxy. The weak human husband had raised his sword, and the stars had indeed trembled. But more than that, he had helped build something new. A partnership based on mutual respect and genuine affection. A bridge between worlds that had begun with deception but had become real. In the palace behind them, diplomats and officers drafted treaties and planned joint operations. But on that balcony, two people simply stood together, finding comfort in presence and possibility in tomorrow. Daniel had come to Surath Prime as a spy. He had become an advisor, a warrior, and finally, truly, a husband. The galaxy would never see Earth the same way again. But more importantly, he would never see himself the same way. Sometimes the greatest victories were not won through strength or deception, but through the courage to be honest when it mattered most. And sometimes the most dangerous weapon was not a virus or a warship, but a human who decided to care about someone enough to risk everything to protect them. The stars had trembled not because of Earth's hidden power, but because one man chose to reveal it for love. That, more than any tactical doctrine or military capability, was what made humanity truly dangerous and truly worth knowing.